Possession crucial from this. How much longer will the referee allow? Dublin lead by a point, and there's the whistle. It's over. It's over.
We earned it by winning the last 2 matches on the road, and that's not going to be taken away from us.
But what I love in hurling, I love players that will never give in.
He hits it. It's over the bar. Oh, holy Moses.
Hello, welcome to the RTÉ GAA Podcast. Happy St. Patrick's Day to you all. Me and Rory were in green. Our guests today, not so patriotic, Colm Keys and Ciaran Whelan. How is everybody doing? Top of the morning to you.
Good, Mikey.
Hi, Mikey.
Good.
I know you're very patriotic, lads. You're so patriotic you don't have to wear green to show it. I'm obviously only joshing with you. Right, we'll have Darren McCurry on later to look ahead to the, as Colm Keys would describe them, meaningless hurling league matches finale this weekend. We can discuss that in a bit. But the Football League does still mean a lot, or at least there's a lot hinging on this weekend. So we're going to have a good look at Division 2 and Division 3 in a little while. But the news is abounding this week, which is nice for the likes of Colm and myself. It's nice when there's headlines floating around. We might start with the GPA row that keeps on going. Yesterday, the GPA released another statement, which was basically a very long explanation for their stance from Matthew O'Hanlon, and it was a bit dense column, a lot of it training loads, etc. But at the end of it, at least, the GAA upper echelons might have felt how a lot of hurling centre forwards feel on occasion. They felt the full force of Matthew O'Hanlon towards the end of it, where he kind of accused the GAA of kind of using player welfare as a sop, as a cover for penny pinching or for cost saving, which Tom Parsons did the same thing, but perhaps in a more polite manner. Matthew O'Hanlon, by the end of that very long statement, kind of got to the meat of it, didn't he?
He did really, and I thought it was an impressive intervention. He's a very polished communicator, as you probably know, being a fellow countyman, but he is. He certainly led on the integration front a few weeks ago too. So he made some very valid points. There's no question about that. That there's a lot of nuance, I suppose, around intercounty training. That in some parts of the season, there probably will be requirement for more gatherings than there would be, for instance, in the week of a game. But I do think it will all return pretty much to the same point in that the number of sessions will probably end up being balanced out over a particular year, and that's where this is heading to. But with regard to penny pinching, I think there's probably an element in that. I know he quoted the 13.5 million figure for the national surplus, but that included all the counties who benefited hugely from state interventions and employment subsidy schemes and things like that. Probably the real figure to concentrate here on is the 1.9 million, which is the central surplus, and combined with last year's loss of 27.1 over 2 years, that's a loss centrally for the GAA, not including the counties or the provinces. Centrally for the GAA, that's 25.2 million loss. And I suppose it's at central level that the GAA are trying to bring a little bit of control in around this from their own finances in one regard. So yes, there probably is a bit of penny pinching, because there has to be in the foreseeable future.
And they've increased the coaching budget as well, haven't they?
They have a 25.2 million hole from 2 years of COVID at central level. I'll stress that again, at central level as opposed to national level. But they also probably, there is an element of trying to bring some control around the frequency of sessions. And Tom Ryan said it in his note that they can't continue to support poor practice, poor player welfare practice. Now, I would think the vast majority of intercounty management would be very much in line with good practice. I'm not so sure that many teams are training over 4 times a week. Stand to be corrected. Maybe up to a fifth, with 2 extra gym sessions that they would travel to, 2 pitch sessions, game at the weekend. That's about it. But I would think it's very, very much in the interests of managers to be as aligned with good player welfare practices as they ever were. And I think they're probably more in tune with it than they ever were. So I don't think there's an awful lot in this. I think There's points of principle, as Matthew O'Hanlon rightly pointed out. I suppose, why should the players, if they're asked, it's not up to them to legislate for how often they go out. It's down to managers. And if the GAA want to make a hard and fast rule out of this, it will be difficult, because restricting certain teams to 4 times a week at a particular time of year is a lot more difficult, obviously, because there's different cycles for different teams. So overall, I think we'll see an annual subvention for training. I do think down the line, I think we will see some sort of equalization, where I suppose those teams that generate less commercially will gain more, and consequently those teams that maybe go further in a championship the previous year will actually get less, something along the lines of a draft. I do think that is where this should probably go, to support the less successful teams, both on and off the field, so that they can improve their product.
Yeah. Well, Colm's right that there isn't much in this. It's grabbing some headlines, but I get the impression it's not really capturing the public's imagination, because a lot of people, while they love cheering on their GAA team and they want them to be as good as possible, also probably think that they're very well looked after, and B, players withdrawing from media duties after league matches, like, if we in the media don't particularly mind about that, I can guarantee you the public don't mind about it. So if the GPA really want to make a stand here, they're going to have to...
The GAA don't care.
Yeah.
The GAA don't really care either. You know?
They're going to have to go a bit beyond withdrawing media duties. But as Colm says, they should be able to resolve this without, a strike or something really drastic.
Yeah, I think they should be able to, because there doesn't look to be much in the difference by what the GAA have proposed. But I think that statement last night probably came off the back of maybe criticism of the GPA probably over the last 7 days, that their priority is player welfare and looking after player welfare. And I think people were pointing at them in terms of that it was beginning to become about greed and stuff like that. So I think that it was a PR, not a PR stunt, but I think it was a very, very good statement that it brought it back to contact hours and training and player welfare. And I think maybe the cart was put before the horse in that it is about the key thing is about player welfare, and I would agree with Tom Parsons last weekend. The players shouldn't be out of pocket, so you have to try find that balance as to what's appropriate for intercounty players in terms of their contact hours and how often they're training. Like, we don't know really what demands managers are really, but we're always surmising that it's 4 or 5 times a week. Like, if you go back, and I'm going back to the year after I left, when Dublin won the All-Ireland in 2011, Dublin trained in the morning and they trained in the evening. They trained twice a day some days. Do you know what I mean? So they were being pulled out at 6 o'clock in the morning. They were back in the evening, and they were probably training 6, 7, 8 times a week. And I think that's probably where, there's a report being done, for GAA around contact hours and around the different demands on players at different times of the year in terms of the number of sessions that are required and stuff like that. So for me, I think the cart came before the horse in that the GPA probably should have come out and said, listen, we're looking at the number of contact hours. This is hugely important. And when we agree some sort of charter around that with the GAA and with the county boards, that we want to make sure we're adequately looked after. And I think that's what's going to come out in the wash when we get to that particular point, So it is a balancing act. They're not, as Colm says, when you balance it over the year, 4 sessions a year at 65 cents a mile doesn't seem unreasonable. But I would come back that we don't know the demands that managers are putting on players, particularly in the early part of the year. And I think managers have a role to play in this in the next step, that they have to really buy into a charter around the contact hours and the demands they're putting on intercounty players, because you're not going to get young lads that are going to turn around and say, I'm not going training, or like that. Players won't speak up, and the manager is king in most counties, and I think they have a huge duty to be involved in this as well, in resolving the issue, because number one, players don't want to be out of pocket. Number two, the GA don't want to run away train in terms of cost, and number three, managers have a responsibility to make sure they get the balance right.
Yeah, and Mikey, I was looking there. I had just look. It's very rough calculation, so I picked a random nameless county on the western seaboard that will go, I would imagine, deep into the championship all the way to the end of July. You were allowed back to training.
Narrow that one down, Rory.
Yeah, you narrow that one down, right? Okay. So they were allowed back to training on the first week of December. So that's 33 weeks, okay? And I picked where the centre of excellence is in the nameless county, and then another particular hub in that county, which would draw maybe 5 or 6 players that will have to travel from that area to their centre of excellence. So it's 60 kilometers one way. So that's 120 kilometers by 4 times a week, which is 480 kilometers multiplied by 0.65. So that's 312 euros multiplied by 33 weeks. And I narrowed that down because it could be less. So that comes in just over 10 grand. And then you multiply that by 35, which is probably your panel of players, which is what they're looking for. And that heads for 360,000 euros. That's just mileage, right? That's just mileage alone. That's before your travel costs, your hotels, your overnights, your nutrition, your gear, your gym, so we're not talking chump change here. So you can kind of see both sides of the argument. I think in fairness from the GAA's perspective, they do have an onus to try and tighten up a lot of the issues around this, because they're probably asking themselves, look, are we really getting bang for her buck here with this? And then from the GPA's perspective, they, as Whelan just articulated, they don't want lads to be put into the invidious position where they feel under pressure to train and they're not being recompensed properly. So, look, I think it's going to be interesting, really, to see how this plays out.
Yeah. I suppose the pretext for all of this was 2 years ago when the collective bill for training was close to 30 million. And Tom Ryan, the Director General, made some comments around that at the time, that it was it wasn't only sustainable, it wasn't desirable either, and that drew a reaction at the time from the GPA, and then COVID came in. So I'd say around that 30 million. That bill will be less this year. The cost will be less because it's a much shorter season by 6 weeks. So it has been condensed, and the GPA did reference that. But in talking about mileage, I mean, there is a figure there for Mayo, and I just can't put my hand in it now, but one of the years, it could have been 2017, could have been 2016. Actually, they went to October in 2016. And the mileage bill for all Mayo teams was in the region of 600,000 or 700,000. I stand corrected on that. That it could have been, but I just can't find it there when you were talking, Rory, about a team in the Western Seaboard. Can't be Mayo. Can't be Mayo, by the way. There's no centre of excellence.
Yeah. Once he mentioned the centre of excellence, he kind of narrowed it down even further.
We've narrowed it down to one.
Yeah.
But I suppose the other factor on that column is that they're because of COVID, that there's not as many of them traveling from Dublin. You know, that was one of the big advantages to Mayo, that they were training up in Dublin during the week, but then traveling. They're probably doing a lot of traveling down for matches at the weekend. So being one of the advantages you would hope from COVID is that players are closer to home.
Yeah, and I suppose the other thing that came out of it was that probably some team meetings and perhaps even video sessions can take place remotely. So again, it comes back to what I said at the outset, and Ciaran, you said it too, is there isn't very much here. There isn't very much, but there is a point of principle. And I think that's what the GPA and Matthew O'Hanlon was trying to put across last night, that there is a point of principle, that it shouldn't be, the cut shouldn't be on the players. It should be on the pressure should be on the counties to try and restrict it in some way if it has to be restricted, if there has to be cuts. But like, obviously, there's no cap on training here. The counties themselves can fund the extra training sessions.
Yeah, there's no. But de facto, Colm,
just won't be there.
De facto, the GA are trying to put a limit on it because they know the county boards. One thing that they do here is financial kind of regulation and restrictions, and that's what they're trying to do. But I don't think anybody disagrees that they're doing it a little bit arseways in trying to, kind of penalise the players, or say we're not penalising the players. The county boards will have to pick up the balance here. Yeah, but you could do it in a financial, they could certainly look at doing it in a using a financial method to limit it, but to use the players as the go-between, I think, is what everybody sees is not quite right here.
But I think, Mikey, on that, certainly the players want a definitive structure from the top that they know they're guaranteed, because I think when you leave it back to the county boards, let's be very frank about this, some county boards will be much better than others, and some probably of the weaker counties could be left out of pocket,
and that's where, Ciaran, that's where the equalization around commercial revenues and about how far they travel into. There are lots of ways that financial equalization model could be introduced, and there is a start on it at the moment. There is an extra grant for those being provided for those counties who generate less commercial revenue. And there are other, like obviously the TV and sponsorship money as well. There's a grant, a dividend, 185,000 in 2019 was given out to every county, no matter what they generated independently of the GAA. That was given out. So there's work around that can balance it up and that can shore up those counties so that they can provide proper expenses.
Yeah. Okay, we'll move on. Rory, Darren McCurry doesn't do many interviews, and fair play to Thomas Nibbuck and the BBC to get him onto their excellent GA social podcast. There's been some great interviews on that recently. But my God, when he does an interview, he makes it memorable. We all know Tyrone have lost a few players of late. And he didn't hold back. If I was one of those boys under 26, my frame of mind would have been, let's go back and try to do something that no other team in Tyrone has done. Try and go back and win back-to-back. I think maybe they were thinking a wee bit more about themselves than the Tyrone team and the people of Tyrone. This man did step away from the panel himself a couple of years ago, which is kind of makes it all the more interesting. But it's good. And Colm McShane said as much to us yesterday at another event that they are feeling McCurry wasn't saying that to be cruel. I'd say they're feeling these absentees now.
You always have to be careful about throwing rocks from inside a glass house. But it's going to, I think what we've heard in relation to their preparation, I suppose, is the fact that it's probably weakened their abilities, and their A's versus B's probably drop off in training. They mightn't have the same level of intensity, the same quality is there. But I suppose this kind of the whole idea of players pulling out and dropping off panels probably ties into the very first conversation we had in terms of, burnout, lads, looking at other aspects of their lives and maybe feeling that, do I really want to be putting 35 hours a week in here and seeing no game time when there's a whole other world out there? So you can't blame anybody. Like when you get into intercounty football, you don't sign a contract. If you decide to walk away, that's your own business. That's the way I'd look at it. Now, I think from Darren's point of view, he does make a good point in that they were in a position whereby Tyrone were looking to try and do something that no Tyrone team has managed. And I think that task has probably been made all the more difficult now for them, given the fact that they have lost these players. But look, I think they'll have their work cut out this weekend, and it's from Darren's point of view, maintaining their Division 1 status should be far more on top of their list of priorities than worrying about Maguire at this point.
I think, Mike, it's quite simple in my view. I think when you're in the first 15 and you're performing well, you look at life through a different lens.
Yeah.
And it's very, very different to the guys that are bursting the butt in training and maybe sitting on the bench and not seeing light at the end of the tunnel. And probably even a lot of those players didn't feel, as much as they won the All-Ireland last year, you'd never probably feel the same or get the same joy that the first 15 does. So I think Darren McCurry's probably seeing it in a different light, and as he said, he was probably, he spoke about, he's going to walk away when Mickey Hart was there, and he lost his confidence and stuff like that. So I think every player is different depending on their circumstances and with the commitment that's required. If players don't feel that, and maybe it comes back, really good managers can invest more time managing the guys that are not playing, that are actually crucially more important when it comes to June, July and those A versus B games and getting a real competitive setup. And then maybe that's a question mark that has to be asked maybe of Ryan and Fergal Logan. Why have 6 players walked away? So I think, listen, I think Darren McCurry's looking at it through his own lens, in my view.
Yeah,
there has been a culture of players in and out. Lee Brennan has been in and out a few times of the Tyrone squad over the years. Obviously, Conor McAlliskey and Darren McCurry, as he said himself, he was ready to go and had left before. So there is that culture there. That's not apparent in the other top counties, because if you look at Dublin, what did Darren Daly win? He won 7 All-Ireland medals, and he didn't start in All-Ireland final. He didn't start very, very many games. And there are a number of those type of players in Dublin who wouldn't say they were happy to be part of the squad, but they committed to it, and they stayed with it, and that they were just part of that environment, and they created a superb environment. Obviously, there aren't that many Kerry players that have drifted away. Peter Crowley's gone in recent times. Obviously, Tommy Walsh, but Tommy Walsh is into his 30s, well into his 30s at this stage. And over a long period of time, when Mayo were to the forefront, they're obviously back to the forefront now, but right through the middle of the no players, very, very few players left at that stage. None of the other top teams had a drain like Tyrone. And it really has, to my mind, weakened them, because these are all very, very decent players. Tiernan McCann made a big contribution last year off the bench against Donegal. Mark Bradley against Monaghan. They all came in. They're all very, very capable. But for whatever reason, and I find it hard to believe that 6 players on the fringes have all just decided, it's not for me anymore.
Yeah.
I just find it hard.
There's no
swear that 6 of them have all decided the same thing, that there's no more room for us.
There's no hint that the good cop, bad cop managerial duo that obviously brought into an All-Ireland are driving players away, because, you know, they seem like they inspired him to an All-Ireland final last year, and, like, you know, Mickey Hart, obviously, you know, there's players that come out and said Mickey Hart was the reason they've left, but nobody's come out yet and said anything about Fergal Logan or. I
think the big thing as well with them, I mean, if you look at Tyrone generally, like, it's not like they have their 15 favourites and no one else gets a game, you know, like they do have a, you know, they will experiment. You will see lads coming in, getting chances. So
there was 5 sendings off this league. They would have had lads would got a run. Okay, we will move on. A quick mention, Colm, just for we've got peace in the Ulster Football Championship until it starts. At least Antrim are going to. I think they've seen sense. In my opinion, they've seen sense. I know 6 counties voted in favour of moving the game, but fair play to the aforementioned Tyrone and Derry for standing with Antrim, because I think it would have been grossly unfair if they'd lost their first home match in, was it 10 or 11 years, maybe more, just because Corrigan Park holds less than 4,000. So Cavan are going to have to make do with a smaller allocation of tickets.
Yeah, look, that's the right decision. I think this principle was established in 2018 with Newbridge and Mayo and Kildare, and obviously there was 7,500, 8,000 for a game that could probably have drawn 20,000 elsewhere. I think that's a reasonable figure for 2 well-supported counties at that stage, certainly 16, 17. With Corrigan Park is around 3,500, 4,000. That game would not draw much more than 6,000. The last time they met in the championship, Colm, now it's a long time ago, there was 18,000 at the game. I don't think 18,000 would go to a game anymore between Cavan and Antrim. I could not see it, Rory. I think at the top end, 7. It depends where it's played, of course. It just depends. In Breffni Park, for sure, you'd get a much bigger crowd because the crowd would travel. So, within reason, a venue, I would think any venue that can accommodate half what the anticipated crowd is probably the ballpark fair. There are some grounds still that probably aren't equipped to host, but a lot of work.
The other thing I would say as well, there's a few things though, Colm, that I mean, look, fair play to Antrim, and they've gotten their home fixture. It's 3,500. That's 3,500 before you put media in. This is a championship match. That's 3,500 before you put TV cameras in, TV gantries, because this game will probably be shown live on BBC NI. So that 3,500, by the time you get your safety officers in, could all of a sudden become 2,500 or 2,725. So on the one hand, we spent the first 10 minutes decrying the GAA for not spending enough money looking after its players. And then on the other hand, saying fair play to Antrim for putting a championship match into a venue whereby they're making less money to pay these players the mileage rates that they're looking for. So there's an element of,
but there's no more than the GPA argument. There is points of principle here, and
I understand that.
We go back. There is an established principle here that if a team in a championship match gets drawn out first, they get a home venue, and it goes back to the FA Cup argument. Blythe Spartans or Runcorn or wherever it is meet Manchester United. Well, they can go to Villa Park, or they can go to wherever it is, or they can play them at home and get that atmosphere and draw on that. And again, going against what we said at the very outset, is it all about money? Well, sometimes
It is.
it's not. It can't be. It can't be. It just can't be. So in this case, after Newbridge, I think a line was drawn in the sand on this. There are very, very few intercounty grounds that probably can't accommodate a championship match of this stature. If this was further on in the championship, there'd be no question it would be moved out. I think the hands would be up there. First round, I think you give Antrim their shot at it in Corrigan Park.
Rory, if we can't be contradictory and contrary on St. Patrick's Day, when can we be?
That's true. That's true.
We'll have a quick look at some of the we'll have
Yeah.
a quick look at some of the games, that's because we're running out of time. Poor Derek McGrath will be wondering what we're doing with him. So I'm actually going to skip Division 1. We'll discuss the implications and the ramifications on Monday. But obviously, Division 2 and Division 3 are very interesting. Rory, it's only 12 years ago these two teams were playing an All-Ireland final, and now they're effectively playing a relegation semi-final. Let's call it that, because if either Cork or Down lose this game, if Offaly manage to get any kind of result at all at home to Roscommon, the loser of this game is Down. You'd say, on the evidence of what we've seen so far, Cork are maybe the slightly larger dwarf, but that'd be as far as you go.
I think the Down came down to Cork about 3 or 4 years ago in a Division 2 game, maybe at that time. Or might have been even Division 3, and managed to get a draw, which I think would pretty much doom both teams, really. So, and you could nearly make an argument to say, which game is bigger, the All-Ireland final of 2010 or this game on Sunday? It's going to be a very, very small crowd at it. Look, we both counties are at a low ebb. We have cameras going to it, obviously, and we'll be featuring in the first part of our program on Sunday night, because it is a significant game. In terms of calling it, who knows? Genuinely, who knows? Who knows?
He's given up, lads. He's actually given up. Pat Spillane broke him on Monday, I think. He's just given up. Colm, a bit from a neutral / Meath man's point of view, you're almost free. How do you see it going?
I think Cork will summon something. I just feel Cork will summon something to rescue themselves here. Bad and all as they were, and bad and all as they looked really terrible against Meath. But they have drawn with Clare. Obviously, Down have drawn with Meath in a storm in Navan. But I think with Ian Maguire back, Brian Hayes on the periphery, Brian Hurley back, I just think there's enough good players there. Obviously, Sean Meehan is a huge loss for Cork, given his performances over the last year. But I actually think Cork will summon something to win this game and give themselves a chance of survival. I think they're getting some more players back there. Obviously, the St. Finbarr's players were a little bit late coming back, and maybe they'll just turn it in Cork's favour.
Yeah. Milo, are we a little bit surprised at how Down have performed thus far this year, or is it just a matter of talent drain? Because obviously James McCartan's come back in there. Aidan O'Rourke's on the coaching ticket, very well thought of coach. Is it simply what they just don't have enough to work with, given Kilcoo players gone and other players kind of speaking like similar to Tyrone? There doesn't seem to be a complete buy-in from the best players in Down.
Yeah, and I suppose that's the part they were probably hoping for, that they would get their best team back on the field, with a good coaching team coming in. Listen, they've been very poor in the league so far, and I'd agree that I think Cork just might get something a little bit more at home. I think the home advantage could be crucial in this one. So I'd fancy, maybe Cork just about to squeeze it. They were awful poor last week. They don't look like they've any structure about them and what they're trying to do. They're playing headless football, but even against Galway, there was signs of a little bit of hope when they put up a decent enough score, and I think Cork would just have enough to come through.
There you go, Roy. There's some hope.
All about setting Kerry up for the ambush in June.
He's on the Guinness already, lads. The other game at the top of the table there, Colm, it's intriguing. It is now. It's just worked out as a 3-way playoff for those two spots in Division 1. With Galway, Derry and Roscommon playing each other. So Derry and Galway are playing this weekend. I don't think people are kind of seeing less in Derry than they were before. They've obviously just they had a proper test last week against Roscommon, and this obviously is another such test. Discipline was an issue last weekend, and we got a little bit of flack after the podcast for suggesting that Derry were hard done by. A lot of Roscommon fans saying, they were just as hard done by, and I don't think any of us were saying that it was that was a one-sided affair. It just seemed to be a very, very niggly match, and you kind of hope, given the talent we've seen from both these teams thus far this season, that this match on Sunday between Derry and Galway is a more open affair.
Yeah, home advantage will be a factor here. I sense on a form line through Roscommon, Galway have had the edge over Roscommon teams in the Championship and League last year, but Roscommon have improved. There's no doubt. They have brought in a few players. Eddie Nolan being one at midfield has really given them something, and Enda Smith is really leading Roscommon now in a way that he probably hasn't done before. He's been exceptional, and Donny Smith too. So they have a very, very good forward line, Roscommon. But Galway have had the edge over them, so you would think that they will be equally competitive. But I think home advantage, Derry are very, very well structured, very well set up, very difficult to beat up there, as teams have found out, and I think that gives them a slight edge here.
Yeah, how do you see it going, Whelan?
Yeah, I think, like, you look at Galway and what I still think there's question marks over Galway. Yeah, they're putting up big scores, but look at the teams that they've beaten. Nearly apart from Clare, I suppose, last weekend, the other four were slugging it out kind of at the bottom, and they haven't really been tested or asked a question. And I think this is a big game for them this weekend. You look at Derry, the best defensive record, I think, across the whole four leagues. I think they're conceding an average 8 to 9 points per match, and Galway traditionally have struggled in breaking down defensive structures over the last couple of years. And they're going up to a Derry team that has momentum, and I think very well organised under Rory Gallagher. The Shane McGuigan factor, obviously, has he appealed that? Did he get off, or I'm not too sure where that.
But it was only his second yellow anyway, so he's okay.
He's okay. So he's
second yellow. It was a second yellow. So
did it not? It didn't come out that he was suspended. No.
Not that I saw anyway. No.
Not for a second yellow, he wouldn't be.
Unless it was for something that he said after he got the yellow card.
Yeah, I thought that,
because he let a volley go now as he was walking off.
I thought I read, but I think he was maybe appealing his suspension. So I think that's if he should, like, it depends what he's been reported for. So if he's playing or not, I think is going to be crucial from a Derry perspective. Like I thought last week, I have a real bugbear. I know I discussed it, lads, on Monday, but this thing about the instigator should really be punished, and linesmen should be looking for instigators. It's pulling down top players. I've been consistent in that for years. It does my head in when two lads just are given a yellow card for rolling around the ground when it's obvious it's a defender trying to pull down a forward. But I think obviously he's going to be crucial.
He has got a 1-game ban. Sorry, I'm just checking here. Gaelic Life are reporting it. Yeah, he got a 1-game ban for a comment made following his sending off.
Yeah.
So that's huge.
Yeah, so that could be a significant game changer if he's missing, because we know how reliant they've been on him up front in terms of scores. So if he plays, I think Derry win. If he doesn't, then it really gives an opportunity, opens up for Galway.
Yeah, no, that would be a massive.
And just add, that's the game we're starting with on Sunday night. And it's the one game I'm really looking forward to seeing, because I echo Wheelo sentiments there in terms of this is the first really good test for Galway, but it will be interesting to see now, given light of that news, how Derry managed to cope without Shane McGuigan. So something to really look forward to on Sunday.
Quick mention of Division 3, lads. We really are running out of time. Like I said, there was news this week that's scuppered us. Colm, it always seems to be Division 3. Never mind the Charlton Cup or anything like that. Always seems to be Division 3, where you've got realistically 6 teams in the running. It's I don't know what it is about it. It's like the Championship in English football. It's always slightly compelling. So take Longford and Wicklow out of it, and you really do have. You got 3 teams who can reach 10 points or more, and then you've got Fermanagh and Laois, who, if they win their last 2 games, can make 9 and would have an outside chance depending on the results. So it's speaking of grounds holding matches above their stature. It's to RD for Louth v Antrim, which is
tell
the
me
top
all
of the
about
table.
it. Tell me all about it, Mikey, in terms of cameras and positions and stanchions and we know all about it.
Louth is one county that there really is a deficit of grounds up to a certain standard, but it's in RD, and it's been a remarkable turnaround for Louth given where they were with whatever it was 15 minutes left to go down on the AstroTurf pitch in University of Limerick. Third round match was changed to, and there were something like 5 down to Limerick, and they came back, and I think they scored the last 7 points. Remarkable turnaround, and they've since gone and beaten Westmeath, they've beaten Fermanagh, and they've soared to the top of right into the mix here. And should they beat Antrim, I would expect they will go on and beat Limerick or beat Wicklow in the final round and qualify. And at the heart of all this is, I don't know, is there everything being relative, is there a more valuable player to a team right now than Sam Mulroy? He's just been fantastic. I think he scored 235 so far in the league, and so he led that fight back against Limerick. He also scored the equaliser against Longford. He's been so vital to them. He's got goals at important times too. And for years you would have said, well, the most valuable player to a county relative to everything would be Michael Murphy. But Sam Mulroy in Division 3 with Louth, he's the difference between them, possibly going back to Division 4 and now looking likely, in my view, of stepping up and getting back into Division 2. And he's been terrific for them. And I expect Antrim beat them in the first round, Mickey Hart's first competitive game last year. That was also in Louth. Louth are a much improved team since then. Obviously, so are Antrim, but I think Louth's improvement is very significant. And I think we'll be looking at them being one of the promoted teams.
And can I just say, for the record, if you go back to our Football League prediction podcast, only one person predicted that Louth would be promoted. That was me. Obviously, I wouldn't be making such a big deal out of it if it was anybody.
They're not there yet.
I know, but it was like
a draw in that game, Mikey, could open up in the following week.
Because anything can happen in that division.
I know, yeah.
Division is so topsy-turvy.
It is. It's very interesting. Except for my adopted county Wicklow, who are certainly out of promotion race, and they may be the first team relegated. At least Wexford can't be relegated. Anyway, that's enough talk about football. I'm going to go talk about hurling now, where Wexford are top of the tree. Whelan, thank you very much, and we'll catch up on all the football doings on Monday. Enjoy your St. Patrick's Day, and we'll get Derek McGrath in now to talk about hurling.
Thanks, lads.
He hits it, it's over the bar! Oh, holy Moses!
Welcome back. We've been joined by Derek McGrath. Happy St. Patrick's Day, Derek.
How are you all doing?
We're all good. So looking, Colm, one of the reasons we got you on this week is you wrote a piece which I found quite interesting. Something we've struck on before about the fact that the Allianz Hurling League isn't quite as compelling as the Allianz Football League, or quite as compelling as a lot of sporting competitions, really, because it's, first of all, it's arguable how many teams are too bothered to win it. A case in point this season would be Limerick. Then there's the fact that the best teams are diluted into 2 divisions. It's very hard to get relegated from it if you're any good. And there's semi-finals and a final, when really most people probably think that a final would suffice. So this weekend you've got Wexford and Cork playing down in Wexford Park, and they've both already qualified. Limerick are playing Offaly, needing a result to not be in a relegation playoff, which we'd all think would be hilarious if Offaly pulled it out of the bag, but I don't think anybody's really expecting it. Galway, Clare, Laois, Dublin, Tipperary, Antrim, there's something to play for there, but we're not really expecting huge results. So you're kind of looking at one game in Nolan Park as the kind of, it's kind of the game this weekend, which is a shame when it's the final round of fixtures.
Yeah, I do. And the point I would make is that you see what's going on in the Football League. And now maybe there's an element of comparing apples and oranges, and you can flip that argument and say, well, there won't be much consequence in April and May when the provincial football championships are playing out and there's cut and thrust in the hurling round robins, and that probably will be the way it'll play out, but it'll be for a much shorter period of time. And ostensibly the league is the second competition, still the second competition. There isn't any question about that. The championship and All Ireland, the provincial and All Ireland are linked. And I just get the sense that it's almost by design, it's been converted into a development league, a preamble up to the round robin, that the round robin has been so cut and thrust that you just can't have a second competition as intense as that. And that may be the case. And perhaps in another year, you would have everything coming down to the last round, and more teams would be having something to fight for. But I would question also how much they'd be willing to fight for that. Who does it really matter to win the league? Well, possibly Cork. They'd like to put their hands on a national trophy. They haven't won it since 1998. Wexford would have to go back to the early 70s for them. I'd be pretty sure Waterford would covet it as well. And Kilkenny have always, but would they really spoil for it in any case with the looming championship just now only 4 weeks? And by the time they play a final, whoever qualifies for the final, it'll be 2 weeks. Obviously, if it's Waterford, they'll have Tipperary coming back down the road to them just 2 weeks later. So how does that square with their championship preparation? It's a little bit different for football. But in terms of talking points, there aren't many talking points through the current league. Limerick's form, okay, they lost 4, but by comparison to where Dublin were, there's far much more. There appears to me to be far greater consequence to a team like Dublin losing 4 league games than there is to Limerick losing 4 games. There's much more consequence to the bottom of Division 2 in the football than there is to the bottom of Division 1A and 1B in hurling. So the other point is it moved away from 2 merit-based groups in 2020, and obviously that was done for a reason. Managers felt that they weren't able to run players in; it was too cutthroat and experimentation. But I felt that always had a little bit more consequence. It made it more interesting, and I think I feel, having seen this league play out, I feel a merit-based Division 1A and 1B would suit the game better and would engage people more.
Yeah, Derek, you won a proper league in 2015. You know, when it was still it was still two. You know, it was a Division 1A and a Division 2B by right. It was the first one since 2007 and only the 3rd overall. So I'm not even going to try and make the argument to you that it didn't matter to you then. It clearly did. But I guess the argument we're making now is certain teams in certain years, it might mean something to them, but there's no argument that it means something to every team every year.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because when I was manager of Waterford now, I would have championed for the current format, because when you're manager, you have a kind of a selfish, not a selfish outlook, but you're kind of thinking to yourself, the reality is, I suppose, there's a kind of a template there, or there's been discussions and, help, I suppose, kind of purported to be kind of directed towards, the seemingly kind of second tier counties, if you like, without being insulting, i.e. kind of Offaly, Laois, Westmeath, that have, been competitive without winning a huge amount in the current league. And there's kind of a disparity there between those teams. So there's a safety net, to be honest with you. If you want to be completely honest, there's a safety net for the top 4 teams in each division, actually the top 5 teams out of the 6 in each division, that they nearly know that they're not going to be relegated. So the consequences of being relegated, and you mentioned the league, and we were relegated twice under my tenure. My first year in 14 and my last year in 18. And the consequences in terms of dissipation of confidence, depending on where your trajectory is significant. Much, particularly if you're from a Waterford or you haven't won an All Ireland, or you're not coming on the back of what John Coyley has done in Limerick, etc. It's different. So it's definitely less cutthroat, but it's probably an opportunity, putting a management hat on, to kind of be able to say, right, we can time it, if you like. Now, having said that, I don't think, the argument that, how much I heard, even, I think Liam Sheedy and Joanne talking on the League Sunday, last Sunday week, I think, about the fact that, you needed 2 weeks or 3 weeks if you get to a league final I think given the participants involved, and Colm has alluded to this already, Cork, Wexford, Waterford, I think they'll want to win the league, and I don't see their progress in the championship being too particularly stalled or kind of, you know, hindered by winning a league. And that'll be my take on it, you know, and nor do I see Limerick's loss of their 4 games particularly hindering their progress in the championship as well. So it's interesting, because even a couple of years that we were relegated, you were on 4 points and you were relegated on, you go into a playoff with the 5th and 6th based on goal difference or scoring, and it can be fairly cutthroat, you know. So as a manager looking back now, I would welcome the current format, but as a kind of a viewer and spectator, it's definitely lacking a bit of you know, not just based on this weekend's fixtures, but just overall, it's lacking a bit of kind of cut, I suppose, more than anything.
Rory, I was thinking about it this morning, and I said, seeing as our main competition is now a league, you know, there's an argument that the league doesn't need to be a league. So, you know, I was kind of looking at a few options. You could obviously go with a straight knockout competition, which would have, you know, some benefit in terms of excitement, but obviously it would mean in terms of the prep competition, some teams will be getting one game. So the other option would be like a bracket system, like say how the Hockey World Cup works, where everybody plays, and if you lose, you kind of go into the Shield, and you're in the 6th to 8th place playoff, or the 5th to 6th place playoff, and you know, so you're guaranteed maybe 3 games, but almost like your route is set by your first game. You're either in the winning bracket or the losing bracket. And then the other option I thought of was kind of what they do in domestic New Zealand rugby, which I kind of like, is the Ranfurly Shield, which is kind of like boxing. It's kind of like the winner has the shield, and if you beat the winner, then you're the winner.
Winner stays on.
Yeah, kind of thing, you know. There's a few options. Like we're not tied to the league being the league, seeing as the championship is a league.
It's difficult, but it is difficult because your championship is based. It's very set. It's a provincial round robin. You know who you're playing every year on year, and it's a good system. There's no point in saying that the hurling, the provincial round robin, is a very good system. It has worked well. We'll see how the 6 teams in Leinster now works out this year, but it has worked well. There is no doubt. So we can't lose sight of that either. Very simple tweak for me is to go back to the 2 merit-based, and I can accept Derek's argument because that was always the sentiment of the managers at the top level. But I do think that the best teams should be putting out as close to their best teams in the second most important competition. That would be my sense of it, especially one so close to the championship.
But I like the way you're thinking, Mikey, because I think the league does actually afford the GAA and hurling and the main stakeholders the opportunity to experiment, and I think that's what should be taken now, is try things, you know, like do stuff that might. Now look, the reality as well is, as we know, well, certainly since my time watching hurling, which is going back now, I suppose nearly 40 years at this point, like in as much as I can remember, it's been rejigged every few years. And every few years someone says, well, we don't like this format, let's go back to that format. Well, we had that format, but let's go back to this other format. So it's like, I think at this stage, nearly everything has been tried in so far as we can. Maybe it's a brand new way of thinking it, or maybe the league. And again, I really enjoyed Colm's piece, and I think it's the points he made were perfectly valid. But then I was saying to myself, maybe it's just the case that the league is what it is. Like that what it is now is what it's probably meant to be, and what it always should be, which is a warm-up competition for the real league, which is now starting. Because obviously, when the round robin came in 2018, it put a whole new complexion on how managers and players and supporters and everybody would start viewing a league-based format. So I think that's its biggest problem at the minute, in that in hurling now you have 2 leagues, one that matters, one that really doesn't. And I suppose, is there a way of looking at the one that doesn't and injecting a bit of life into it in terms of a rejigged format? Again, that might, you know, spark people's interest, imagination, and maybe draw people back in, you know, and make the competition a little bit more vital.
I know there's money involved, Derek, in that, as we were discussing in the football part of the show. It is all important in the GA. But is there any argument to say that there's too many games in the league now? Could you split the top division into 4 groups, or like our team? Because would there be a bit more jeopardy then if we're accepting that managers won't agree to go back to the merit-based one, which I think we all concede the merit of, no pun intended, but like, is there like Antrim and Tipperary are playing a game this weekend which is of no consequence at all, and the most consequential thing that could come out of it is serious injuries that rule players out of the championship? Are they playing too many games for a competition that at this point, is meaningless to half the teams?
2 points on that, Mikey. I think one, given the fact that the round robin gives you 4 games, you then can alter the league to a shorter league if you want. So change it can happen, right? The second thing is, if you did go back to a merit-based league, the one major issue I had with it, and again maybe this is just a person, you finished 5th in 1A, right? And the 4th team that finished in 1B get a quarter-final spot, So technically
they would all be dispensed with, obviously.
Yeah, exactly, and that's my point. That's my very point. So the merit base, you're looking at then the team that finished 10th in actual fact in the league are rewarded with a quarter-final, and your head is on a chopping block down in Waterford because you're in a relegation playoff. You know what I'm saying? So it's just again, I'm just kind of reliving the times in terms of what could possibly happen as a result of the league. But I'd be open to change. The round robin for me changes everything, because that's a brilliant league championship. That's I can't even you can't help thinking about, even now, I know I'm fast forwarding, like Waterford against Tip, and 5 days later we're down playing Limerick in Limerick. What's going to happen? Who are the 3 to go through? So that's what you're kind of thinking about constantly. But look, post-COVID, you have huge, you've good attendances. I went down to watch Wexford and Offaly now on a last Saturday week, I think, or 2 weeks ago, or whatever, and it was kind of a, you're getting good attendance. It's a good atmosphere at the place.
It was a huge crowd in crowd in Walsh Park for Waterford Tip, wasn't there, Derek? There was a massive crowd,
You got 6,500, 7,000 there, and definitely a good feel-good atmosphere there around the league. And the argument also, and we'll probably talk about Waterford and Kilkenny in a while, like, I'm contradicting myself here, because I'm going to say it doesn't matter, but I do think they'll be leaving everything out in the field in Whelan Park on Sunday. So that, that kind of, the knock-on effect of getting some confidence up and keeping the confidence up will be important too,
Yeah. There are other small little things. I mean, we spoke earlier on about Samuel Roy and, the performances that have been taking place in the lower echelons of the Football League. I mean, is it worth looking at potentially an all-stars selection at the end of the league, that is spread across, all the teams, and then have a separate all-stars? You don't have to call them all-stars, call them whatever you want. Or is there potentially you throw in a holiday for the winners at the end of the league for each of the divisions? Can you mess around with maybe 3 points for a win, bonus points? All these types of things I think should be looked at to try and, use the league for what it is. It's a great opportunity to experiment ahead of what we now know is the real deal, which is the Championship League, which takes place only 4 weeks in time.
Yeah. We'll tease you on. We'll actually keep that Waterford Kilkenny chat just till the end, because to mention the lower divisions column, it is very much worth mentioning that Division 2, with the prize of the prize of potentially coming up to Division 1 is probably going to be decided Saturday night, with Kerry travelling up to Down. We were lamenting the form of the Down footballers in the first half of the show, so I think credit must go to the Down hurlers, who have perhaps surprised a little bit to be kind of in pole position there this season.
But Kerry have been very strong in this Division 2, and obviously under new management, they certainly gave signs of that at the very outset of the season when they beat Tipperary, albeit a weakened Tipperary team, but still, that was a huge result for them. They've obviously benefited from the introduction of 3 players from outside as well, that have been making a difference, and that rule change has benefited them. So all told, even though it's an away fixture, I expect Kerry to advance and get back to division up to get back into Division 1B.
Yeah. Stephen Malumphey, would have had him pegged as managerial potential, Derek?
Yeah, he was involved in my first year now in 14 as a manager. Yeah, great guy. Obviously military background there. Very organised, highly efficient, good disciplinarian. Would have come across him a lot of times here playing against Ballygo football in the club scene. very underrated player for Waterford, even under Justin McCarthy's era. If you think back on like left half forward, he was one of those guys that was doing the Garrod Hegarty role before it was ever fashionable to be, you know, that deep wing forward role. You know, a very clever player coming deep. You know, I think in 2007 Dan got hurt of the year. I think 7 of Dan's goals, 3 or 4 assists from Stephen Malone for that particular year. Just little hand passes, very selfless in his play, and I think that selflessness is obviously evident in what he's doing in Kerry, continuing good work. The interesting thing about that, again, and it's back to our debate, is if you take the Antrim scenario where they've had really good performances, last year you take the Westmeath scenario where they had a really good performance against ourselves down here in Welsh Park, and Westmeath were then able to win the Joe McDonagh on the back of being exposed to the top level games, and that's the thing, you know, that kind of, not the yo-yo effect, but Kerry, you know, will have to be hugely competitive in the McDonagh as well as getting promotion. And if they're promoted next year, we'll be talking this time next year about the learnings for Kerry. And it's very hard not to think that we won't be talking that way when Kerry will be in a group next year, perhaps if they're promoted with, you know, with heavy hitters. And that's where we're back to Colm's piece, I suppose, you know.
Yeah.
The problem, as we know then, and this is where, you know, the whole thing from a hurling perspective becomes more difficult. I mean, Westmeath have been, I wouldn't say languishing, but they've been in Division 2A, so they haven't been exposed to top level hurling. And in 4 weeks' time, they've Kilkenny coming to town in the championship, you know. So,
yeah.
Just Rory, we're doing great on the segues today, so we will move on to Kilkenny and Waterford. This is seamless, lads, seamless. It is the game that stands out really, Derek. We're imagining TJ Reid is home from his honeymoon now a couple of weeks, so maybe he'll get get a run out. So will he be up against Tig de Barca, you know, Hugh Lawler, Mikey Kiley, Paddy Deegan, and Patrick? Like there's matchups all over the field here, and we've been talking about, shall we say, Waterford's manly approach to games thus far this season. It's been almost Kilkenny-esque, so we could be in for, you know, the Hurley men will want to be on their toes on Sunday, I think.
Yeah, and look, I think you'll possibly see, and again, not that I'm out of touch here, but I think you'll possibly see the reintegration of some, maybe Daisy, maybe Austin back in the squad. I don't think Jamie's fit yet, but Caleb Lyons nearly ready as well. I think those 4 major players for Waterford, Caleb Lyons, Jamie Barron, Austin Gleeson and Desi Hutchinson, maybe Ian Kenny might get a run the full back line, because, you know, they'll have 2 weeks, I suppose, this week and the almost guaranteed semi-final, shall we say.
Yeah, mathematically, it's
mathematically, I suppose, yeah. Like, so that will be I think Waterford will be going all out, but I think they will maybe squeeze in 3 or 4 players. You might even see Cormac Daly back in the squad as well, and then it'll be, I think they'll pin down from semi-final of a league and National League final as to their final squad. The Kilkenny one is interesting in that it looks like Hugh Lawler at 3, Paddy Deegan at 6, Pádraig Welch at 11, maybe TJ Reid at 14, with a sprinkling of new players as well. Depending on, I know you've had the Pádraig Welch debate before, but it looks like he's settling on that, you know. It looks like Hugh Lawler at 3, as I said, Paddy Deegan at 6. So it'll be interesting. You know, regardless of the result, I think Waterford are ahead of Kilkenny, and that's my honest assessment. I think they're ahead of Kilkenny. I'm not saying they'll actually definitely win next Sunday, because Kilkenny, I think they have to win. You know, I think Kilkenny have to win to guarantee a semi-final spot. And they're hard to beat all the time in Nolan Park, but I think Waterford are ahead of them, and I think we're in a really good place. You know, we're in a really good place.
Yeah, Colm, I think every week when we have a hurling podcast, we're just waxing lyrical about how Waterford are playing, but also kind of boggling our minds at the players that haven't seen any game time yet, and just talking about how they've had tough time with injuries over the last 2 years, but now that they, touch wood for them, have everybody fit, their strength and depth it's unmatched.
It's as strong as what is out there in terms of squad, for sure. A couple of the striking things for me was, I think the Ballygunner players, after winning their All-Ireland club title, that were back within about 10 days. That was quite striking and significant for me. There's a real momentum building behind Waterford, obviously stemming from, at the outset, Liam Cahill's recommitment to them in the face of pressure to come and manage his own native county. That's quite a statement at any stage. Their home record under Liam Cahill over the last now into 3 seasons has been very, very impressive. I think they've won, Derek might correct me here, but I think they've won all 7 games they've played. They've beaten Limerick, they've beaten Tip down there twice, they've beaten Cork Galway. They've won so many games down there, and obviously they're going to play 2 games down there in the round robin. So that's quite a psychological help to Waterford right now. You talk about the players that have to come in, obviously from Ballygunner. A couple of them were reintroduced the last day. And then you've Stephen Bennett scoring 116. Now you'll say some of them were frees and all of that, but just so accurate, so consistent, so dynamic for them at all times. I mean, just the way they blitzed Tipperary, albeit a bit of a wind advantage the last day, but their fitness, their staying power was really, really it. You'd always say that for a team that's finishing strong. But to me, looking back at it, it was actually, I thought it was evident how competitive and how they outran Tipperary in the end. And I think it's probably a point that Liam Cahill referenced himself. So all things considered, I think they're in a very, very strong place. I think they're probably nearly qualified as it is. It would take a remarkable sequence of results. I think that it would actually require Kilkenny beating Waterford and Dublin beating Laois
by 50 points or something.
53 points is the difference. I just don't think it's feasible, and that's why
Waterford are in the semi.
Derek, I think the need is greater for Kilkenny in that respect, and while Waterford will be, they will be competitive. They're effectively in to me they're in the league semi-final. It's not. I think they're a bit out of reach for Dublin.
It's also. Go on, Derek.
Sorry, but the other thing I was going to say, and it hasn't been kind of noted, I suppose, is that I think there's a strong argument to be made that these players are actually reaching their prime now. Like I came in, I was involved in 14, right? Austin was involved in 14, Tig was involved in 14, Jamie Barron in 14, and Jamie Barron actually in 13. Like they're actually in their 9th, 10th season now, and if I just add up the losses of finals, people were saying Waterford have to be competitive. I lost 4 finals anyway. We lost 4 finals out of 5. They lost the league final under Pádraig Fanning. They lost the Munster final under Liam Cahill. They lost an All-Ireland final. So my point being, I suppose, they've lost the last 8 finals they've played in the 9 years, I suppose, since 14. So they're on a mission now. I'll be straight up to you. This team, I've been lucky enough to just watching from afar, even the odd training session, just trying to pick up a few drills there. This team are on a mission, and I think that's really, there's a hunger. So, people talk about how they're playing and, running the ball from deep and forwards, back in the backs and breaking everywhere. Fine, no problem with that. And the momentum from Ballygunner and the recommitment from Liam Cahill, definitely. All factors. Huge psychological factors. De Burke's presence, he can do it all. Like, this fella can do it all, right? But the big factor for me is they're going for it, like they're all in, you know what I mean? They're all in, and that's it might sound like an old-fashioned motivational kind of approach, but you can see it, like it's very evident,
Well, it worked well enough for the guy on the other sideline for long enough, Rory, didn't it? Kilkenny, they had all the hurlers, but what separated them was that absolute will to kill.
Yeah.
Or at least win. Sorry, kill's a bit much.
Yeah, they had
actually the man himself used that phrase, didn't he?
That's true. Yeah.
They had an embarrassment of riches though for a very long time that created internal competition that drove them on, and you just couldn't rest on your laurels. Now look, that's the hallmark of any Brian Cody team. I don't think that's ever going to change. We saw it again the last day. There was move to talk, and I was one of them that felt that it was Dublin's time to really lay down a marker, and Kilkenny came out and gave him a right reddening. So the minute you kind of, like in classic media, the media wrote us off the usual, like, when you do that with Kilkenny, it usually comes back to bite you. But at the same time, I mean, look, we sat at the very beginning of the year, we talked about, our runners and riders and who we thought might kind of, make a big statement in this league. And I said Waterford, and I still stick to that. I stick to my guns on that.
That's easy to stick to your guns on it now, Rory.
Yeah, I know. But I did say it at the start of the year.
You did.
I felt that they have, that they're at a stage in their development now. They've got a brilliant management. They've got a brilliant panel of players. That was even before seeing them, by the way, and they've obviously done a lot of work in terms of their physical fitness. And then you marry all of that up with what Derek just spoke about, which is just that sense of togetherness and that sense of missionary drive that they now have to just nail this once and for all. And I think, look, a league title will probably be a good stepping stone from their point of view. I don't really see it being a stumbling block or hinder their championship in any way, because they have such depth in their panel. I think from Waterford's perspective, they may as well go on and try and win this league. And I'd expect a good performance from them as well on Sunday. They'll feel look, like Derek is probably far better than me to articulate this, but anytime Waterford have an opportunity to play Kilkenny, if there's nothing on it at all, there will always be something on it, because just the nature of the rivalry and the fact that the two counties are so close, and the border and all of that. I mean, you know, so I think they'll go up to Nolan Park on Sunday, and they'll feel, you know, look, we want to put down a marker. I do still firmly believe that Munster hurling is just better than Leinster hurling at the minute, and I think we'll probably see that on Sunday.
Yeah, I don't know why you had to stick in that jibe there at the end, but
yeah, I know, but I do think it is. I just think the standard in Munster is higher.
No, look, I think I don't think there's any argument there. I think anytime we have a Munster pundit on here, Dalo, be it Derek, whoever, like, you talk about the league and you all just project forward to the Munster Championship because you're all just, you can't.
I find that interesting. Munster historically has probably always been.
That's
stronger.
True too, Colm.
Except for the outlier.
It's always been.
It's just stronger. It's a stronger base there. I mean, Wexford and Offaly will come from time to time. Kilkenny will always be there, but the five counties in Munster have, you know, they're
6 now. Kerry are coming.
But I suppose the point is that, you know, like, if that's your bar, and if, in my view, Waterford are at the very top of that bar, then I think the task is greater for Kilkenny this weekend than it is for Waterford. Because
I don't think anybody's denying that. Yeah, no, definitely the balance of power has flipped there. They won't get Ferrybank off you anytime soon, Derek.
No, and my own parents are from Ferrybank. My own poor father is buried in Ferrybank. Yeah, so we'll have a big connection there with the local rivalry. And obviously in school, we have a huge amount of boys from Mooncoin and Piltown and Kilmacow, etc. And listen, we had a couple of wins over them in the league in 16 and 17 when I was involved, and they come into school the next morning and they'd rather kind of drolly tell you that they don't hand out all Ireland medals in March, sorry, you know, and you get the kind of. So it's, look, as Rory alluded to, it's going to be good to turn the screw as well if we got the chance up there on Sunday. And I think we'll be going up, not with that intention now, that's probably unfair on the team, but I think Waterford will be going up there to keep the momentum going. And the added bonus, I suppose, is that you're unlikely to meet Kilkenny until semi-final stage of Ireland. You know, like, unless you know, so that's the kind of it.
So you go up there and leave it all out there this
Sunday.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Well, look, it's one of about 25 intriguing games on Sunday. Yeah. Have fun there, Rory. I'll have fun.
No, 33 inter-county matches happening this weekend, and we'll have a third of them in the show. But I'll still be wearing my flak jacket when we're back here on Monday morning for the barbs and the crossbows to be fired. It's impossible to cover them all.
My website is infinite size and I still struggle. So God help you in your show.
One last point, given the day that's in it, and again, very interested in the two lads' views and your own view, Mikey. And look, far be it for me to ever agree with anything Martin Brennan says, right? But I did think that he made a pretty valid point in the Independent yesterday or the day before in relation to today. And today, as we know, is it's a special day. It's a public holiday, and it's a public holiday for good reason. And I understand that the Croke Cup and Hogan Cups are taking place in Croke Park, but look, with all due respect, I mean, who does that really matter to? And that it was maybe an opportunity missed, that maybe some class of inter-county action, or, I mean, like, don't whisper it, the Railway Cup or whatever used to happen in years gone by, like, that's obviously not going to happen now. But if there was some class of attraction of our national game, which is hurling or football or something going on in Croke Park today to draw people in after the parades, rather than end up where we know they're going to end up. Well, let's be honest. So I thought that was maybe an opportunity missed by the GA, and possibly something that they should look at down the line. For instance, if Cork Wexford, as much as we spoke about it being a dead rubber, had that been played there today, I think there would have been a great crowd go in there, and it would have been a lovely way to spend the day, especially now given the weather the way it is.
I don't know. What do you think, Colm? Maybe if they rejig the calendar a little bit more, we could have the Division 1 hurling relegation playoff there.
Yeah, you could. If you're putting a game on midweek, as St. Patrick's Day obviously sometimes falls, that can create difficulties too, I suppose, when you're just landing a game. If there's no, I don't know, is the bank holiday tomorrow's bank holiday always going to flag? I think it's gone back to
It's Bridget's Day.
It's hard to know what you put in there. Maybe some of the leagues, yeah. Maybe in time some of the leagues, but I don't think, given the Railway Cup was in that fixture for such a long time, certainly it reached its peak in the 60s, and the club finals had a great run there too. But I suppose everything has its time, and forces pull these games and dates in different directions. It just really, I'd get it hard to see what would fit in there and become a permanent fixture. If it's suited for league games to be played, yeah, for sure. But that's not always in the middle of the week going to be suitable, because you're really having to align rounds of the league to suit it at that stage. I think it's going to be a difficulty.
What do you think, Derek?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the original discussion around imagination and creativity around festivals, days, hurling in general. I saw Anthony Nash made a point, I think, yesterday about possible Friday night games. It's a wider debate. Given
you're right.
the significance of the holiday, etc., and celebrating, your Irishness, etc., to have something in Croke Park on that particular day, I think would tie in well. Is it a possibility? I think it would work well if the bank holiday is the next day, as it is for this year. Not to take Rory to task or whatever, but the Croke Cup was a significant event in our history down here in school, and that we won 2 in 07 and 08 in Croke Park, and they were they're fairly significant for.
Oh, they're huge. They're huge. I was in a school which I don't know, are we still maybe 3rd or 4th on the roll of honour? We won 4 Hogan Cups, and in my the last one we won, we were all, now I was only in primary school at that time, but we were all put on buses and all brought up to Croke Park to watch it. And the game was actually live on TV now this is like in 1985 when the games were, it was on RTÉ, live on RTÉ television. Like, think how big that was. I mean, look, but at the same time, no different to the club, and even smaller than the club, it is very niche, and I think it doesn't really grab the public's imagination.
I accept that point, and it could be maybe a precursor. I remember being at a league final where Flannans were playing Kieran's, and before a league final in Thurles one year, James O'Connor was over at Flannans. I remember going up to watch the schools match as well. But sure, look, it's worthy of kind of consideration and a bit of imagination and a bit of creativity.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much, lads, for joining us on this national holiday. Thank you also to Whelan earlier. So Derek and Colm, I hope you enjoy the rest of St. Patrick's Day. Obviously, there's a bumper weekend, as we mentioned, so keep across RTÉ Radio, Saturday and Sunday sport. Mainly Sunday sport this week. Nearly everything's on Sunday. League Sunday on Sunday night with Rory, enemy of the people, O'Neill in the producer's chair, and the RTÉ website. And we will chat to you on Monday. Thank you very much.
Cheers, guys.
This how much longer will the referee allow? Dublin lead by a point, and there's the whistle. It's over.
We earned it by winning the last 2 matches on the road, and that's not going to be taken away from us.
But what I love in hurling, I love players that will never give in.
He hits it. It's over the bar.